Welcome, fans, to another live edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast on the Hannibal TV on YouTube. I am very pleased to present today a man that we've been trying to get back on the channel for a while, but here he is. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and the man that I have on your screen, you all know who he is. He's a man perhaps best known for his WWE run, his very high profile WWE run that we're going to get into, but he is also considered one of the finest technical wrestlers that Ohio Valley ever produced. And I would be talking about Mr. Nick Eugene Dinsmore. Nick, thank you for coming on the GNW podcast today, sir.
Thank you for having me. I am cocked, locked, and ready to rock. Let's do this thing.
All right. Well, we've got a tremendous amount of fan input that has been sent in. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, because the Hannibal TV is Canada's top combat sports and pro wrestling channel. I know you've done a lot of wrestling in Canada over the years, and considerable amount in recent years in Northern Ontario and into parts of Winnipeg. How do you find the Canadian fans respond to you whenever you're on a show?
Oh, I feel like the Canadian fans love Eugene. I always feel the warmth. I just got off a big tour with CWE, just like you're talking about, all through Ontario. I've been on tours also with CWE, all through Manitoba. I finished up in Winnipeg. I feel like Winnipeg is Eugene's home away from home. I don't know if I can make that official. I don't know if we got to go to the mayor or the prime minister or somebody, but if we can make Winnipeg Eugene's home away from home, that'd really make me feel good.
Well, I think we could probably hook that up directly through the city, since we don't really have a functioning government right now. But we'll get into that perhaps down the road. What the fans really appreciate when we do these long form career interviews, I find, is the question about your journey into professional wrestling, and whether you were a fan growing up, and if you did, what territories, companies, or wrestlers did you follow that influenced you?
So the first time I saw professional wrestling, I was about 8 when I saw what I think is the very first or maybe the second Saturday Night's Main Event. I lived around the Indianapolis, Indiana area. We lived kind of out in the country. So back then there was cable, but if you lived so far out, there was no cable. So we had just an antenna TV. So I didn't get to see like NWA, which became WCW on TBS, but I could see WWF every weekend, and I could catch Saturday's Main Event. So that's where I first became a fan. And then living around Indianapolis, all of a sudden you hear about the legend of Dick the Bruiser. So
Yes.
there was the wrestling I saw on TV and the legend of this guy that I'd read about in magazines, but I'd never seen on TV. But he was, that aura was there. I ended up seeing him actually in an airport when I was about 8 years old, and he was he's probably mid-60s at the time, but a huge, muscular, hulking figure. Oh my gosh. So when I was in the 8th grade, we moved to the Louisville, Kentucky area, got cable. So now I'd seen NWA before if I stayed at somebody's house, like spent the night at a buddy's house. But now I had it actually, in my house, I had cable so I could watch NWA. And then I was introduced to USWA, the Memphis-based territory, and then I would go to Louisville Gardens on some Tuesday nights and watch that. And this is something I really wanted to do. Then when I was in high school, I went to high school in Southern Indiana, and I was in the homecoming court when I was a senior, and everybody walks out in the gym in front of everybody, and this person wants to go to college to be a doctor, and this person wants to go to college to be a lawyer, and Nick Dinsmore wants to be a WWF wrestler. Yay. So later on the day, this girl came up to me. She was 2 grades younger than me. She goes, "My dad has a pro wrestling school." And it was literally 5 minutes from my house. And that was the Nightmare Danny Davis School of Professional Wrestling, which ended up becoming Ohio Valley Wrestling. So I checked it out when I was 18. Eventually signed up when I was 19. That's where I began my wrestling journey. I was a fan, and this is something I wanted to do. And I told myself, I just want to have one match, see what it's like, and we'll see what happens.
Wow, definitely a fate type situation. Did you, when you went to start, we've heard a lot about the training process, the old school training process, and then the later generational training process, way different from anecdotally what you hear today. What was your, and Danny Davis had and still has such a great reputation for being a trainer. Did you get a lot out of the process to prepare you ultimately that perhaps the cookie cutter WWE or elsewhere approach doesn't?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Danny was very hands-on, and Danny was just fresh off the territory era. This was a very transitional time in pro wrestling. You got to think there was no internet, or the internet had just kind of started, because I started around 96, so the internet was around, but it was very, not many people had it. And he was just, teaching guys how to become pro wrestlers in hopes to make it to USWA, which was still coming locally every week. And it was very transitional. But as he built and more guys, wanted to wrestle, and then when USWA shut down, so there's no wrestling in Louisville, we kind of expanded to the Louisville area. And as it just progressed, it so happened that Jim Cornette was from Louisville. He was living in Connecticut, working for WWE, and he decided he wanted to come home. And Cornette realized that the business needed a feeder system. So what better than somewhere in his hometown with a guy he knew, a guy he trusted, and they built Ohio Valley Wrestling about mid-98.
Yeah, that was of course one of the questions that the fans sent in, given the fact that period of OVW is regarded historically as one of the the golden eras of that particular territory and company. But they also, of course, wanted to know about your experiences with Mr. Jim Cornette, which I'm sure you have quite a few. He seems to have taken a shine, at least by what he said on his podcast about you, like off the hop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cornette helped me out. Jim Cornette has helped me out as much as I give credit to the Hustler Rip Rogers, the Nightmare Danny Davis, and even William Regal. He was one of the pillaring teachers in my career that took me to that next level. Danny was the guy that taught me the moves and how to do them and when to do them and how to stand, and how to look good, how to protect myself, how to be a businessman. Rip was the guy that taught me how to perform in front of a live audience in the ring and really puppet those people. But it was Cornette that first taught me how to be a top guy. And without Cornette, I mean, I never would have been able to succeed. Without all of them, I wouldn't have been able to succeed. But Cornette was the one that really taught me, okay, now we're doing stuff, angles as a top guy. And he always wrote me in OVW as the top baby face, the top heel. I was the local baby face. I mean, he put me over strong. And as myself, Rob Conway being another one, Doug Basham, and the Damager, who became Danny Basham, were also other talent that Cornette would weave the WWE developmental guys through to get them prepared to go to TV. And eventually, the four of us had so much experience and we were so good that we rose to be on the main roster and be on TV.
How do you feel about, he's got probably the most successful pro wrestling podcast out there, and he's quite outspoken, but he comes from, you can't argue his credentials, his Hall of Fame career and everything that he's done. How do you respond? Because you're still active, as we talked about, out there in the independent circuit. You see the product as it's evolved, and that's another question I have down the road, but I'll jump it in now. How do you feel about some of the overly critical critiques he has of the modern wrestling product and the business, and particularly AEW?
You mean Cornette?
Yes, sir.
Is he in the Hall of Fame?
He's had a Hall of Fame career. I believe he's definitely.
Well, without a doubt, he's had a Hall of Fame career, but didn't he induct the Rock and Roll Express? The Midnight Express is not yet in the Hall of Fame, and that's a travesty in itself. I agree with everything he says on his podcast. Now, I like Jimmy, but 8 hours a week might be a little bit much for me to consume if you want it. But I was just with a guy over the weekend, and he goes, I'm a trash man. I'm on the back of the trash truck for hours, and I listen to 8 hours of Cornette a week, and he loves it. And I agree with everything Cornette says. I mean, he's old school and to the point, and it's that basics of philosophy that you need to bring yourself out in, and maybe a little bit updated, maybe a little bit current. But when you start straying from the basics, which is what he professes, then it comes off as not a competitive sport. I think if I throw a grenade in the middle of the ring, everybody falls down. It's funny, it's great, it's laughter, and it has a place on a wrestling show. Eugene could do that, but we're not doing pro wrestling. We're not doing a worked physical competition of wrestling or MMA style, you know, holds and trying to get someone to win and trying to get someone to lose. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put on this, competitive match.
Yeah, those are good points. And when you're out doing your thing in the modern era, and some of this ridiculous stuff like the Invisible Man and like you said, the exploding grenades, that Shikara style, or whatever you want to call it, that's probably not fair. But when you're presented with, they want to book Eugene on the show, do they know what Eugene brings to the table and they kind of stick with that? Or are you asked to do sometimes some bull crap, for lack of a better term, that you're just not comfortable with?
No, no, no. And on all the indie shows I've done, I've never had someone come in with a disrespectful idea. Most of them either have no idea or they've got an idea that's pretty good, or maybe we can tweak it just a little bit and make it fit. Let's do it here instead of here, that kind of thing. But, most people ask me, what would you like to do? And I'm like, oh, no. What do we need to get out of this? After I leave, who needs to be remembered? The guy I'm wrestling, the manager, the promoter, the babyface, whatever it is. And I try to leave the company, or at least my segment, the guys I work with, better after I leave than me just going there and winning and selling pictures. Because I want the business to thrive. I want, when The Rock came out and met Eugene and they became friends and nobody knew The Rock was coming, that was a top guy reaching down and pulling somebody else up. And that's what I feel like. I'm no Rock, of course, but in my limited ability, when I go to these independent companies, I want to make somebody look good so that the next time those fan comes, that guy wrestled Eugene, or he was in the ring with Eugene, or something that elevates these people, because that's what you're supposed to do to keep the business alive.
Yeah, bravo. Very, very old school attitude. Mike D has an interesting question. We've got lots piling up here. He's asking, growing up in Kentucky, were you a Miss Elizabeth fan?
Well, the first time I saw Miss Elizabeth, I was probably still living around the Indianapolis area. But of course, I was a Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth fan. Now, she was from Bardstown, okay? When my mother was, I guess shortly after I was born, she worked in like a medium security prison in Bardstown, Kentucky, where Miss Elizabeth's mother, uncle, somebody worked there as well, because that's where Randy met her, was in Kentucky, in Bardstown, Kentucky. So I never got a chance to meet her, but in the place that I lived, I mean, she was known as being. I mean, I wasn't necessarily. I lived in Southern Indiana, so I wasn't. I was born in Kentucky, but I was a Kentucky boy, and she was a famous person.
Being a fan of WCW, I had to ask you about you did a lot of work on TV for WCW. You surprisingly, when I was doing research, you wrestled a lot of top names there. Wanted to ask how that those shots came about, and was there ever a consideration, given the fact that even though you were in an enhancement role, anybody could look at your work and go, this guy's got something. Did you have any fans in the company at the time, that whole deal?
Well, I could lie to you until they had thoughts of putting the world title on me, but I don't know how that would work. So after Brian Pillman passed away, they had the first Brian Pillman Memorial Show in Cincinnati, and they sent people. Stone Cold was there. Sonny was there when Sonny was managing the Road Warriors with that big spike outfit. But then WCW sent like Jericho was there. ECW sent like Candido, and he was all just jacked up. And all the companies, all the independents came around Cincinnati and had the first benefit show, which they gave to his wife and his kids. And I was in the ring, young Brian Pillman. I believe she was pregnant with him in the photo. I think so, or maybe he had just been born. But I did the first Brian Pillman Memorial Show, and Terry Taylor saw me. Terry Taylor was working for WCW as a creative / talent / scout role, and he started calling me in. So from 98 to 99, I did, I don't know, two Nitros, 3 Thunders, and 10 Saturday nights, something like that. Now, this was when WCW was still on top, but the rails were starting to come off, because I assume they were so disorganized that they released Terry, and all the people that he was the one bringing me in. All of a sudden, I had no contact. Now, I also realized that that was on me while I was there. I should have made other contacts with other people in similar positions just in case that happened. I was 21 years old, man. I was wide-eyed. I was like, oh, my God, this is so cool. I'm wrestling Big Papa Pump on Nitro, on live Nitro. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, my God, this is so cool. So I just kept my eyes open, my ears open, my mouth shut, and just tried to, represent myself as best I could.
Was that ever something that, in terms of Taylor leaving the company, did they ever look at bringing you in a more a mid card role, or did that just sort of evaporate because you did get an awful lot of TV time?
I think when he got released, that was my contact and my go-to, and that connection just ended. I don't know that anybody else picked up the ball on myself or anyone else that he was calling. So if I would have been able to, get my way back in, I think I would have been right there with that New Blood Rising angle. You know what I mean? Which means I could have been right there on the WWE Invasion angle, which means I could have made it to TV a lot quicker. But that's hindsight. One thing though, when Terry Taylor got released, he got hired by WWE. So then, by the end of '99, he had hired me to a developmental contract. So I was one of his guys, and I'm still friends with him today, and it worked out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. You could say that for sure. Before we get into your WWE stage, we've talked about OVW a bit, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing a number of OVW talents from your genre. I wanted to ask you about what you would consider. Actually, it's a two-part question. Your highlight there being a 9-time champion, that team with Rob Conway, and I know you've probably caught the Netflix series, and guys like Cash Flow are starting to get some shine and some mainstream publicity. What do you think of the current situation with OVW and your highlight there?
So some websites say that I won the heavyweight title 10 times, but who's really counting? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's because it was very different from what it currently is to the ride that I was on. We were on Watt Street in a building with a little curtain. Then we moved to Mechanic Street, which is, if people see the older tapes with the pillar in the middle of the video, if you see any of those, the guys where Brock and Cena were, that was on Mechanic Street. Then they moved to the Louisville building, which is where they currently are, but now they totally redesigned it. I mean, they brought it, up to current, like I don't know, designing, whatever the term is, taste or set, or like makes it look cool, I'm not that it wasn't cool before, but you got to update stuff. You know what I'm talking about. So I don't know that I haven't necessarily highlight, because it was an emotional ride that I've been on, and I wrestled for OVW maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I'm still in the family. I'm still on the wall. But it's a place that's very, very close to my heart. That they know I would do anything for them. As far as Cash Flow goes, I ain't never heard of
her. I'm sure he's probably going to catch this, and we'll appreciate that.
Let me put it to you this way. I believe he teaches the beginners class, which was my class that I founded and I started. So if hopefully he's doing the class well, because that was what is close to my heart, was taking the guys that had zero or very little experience and saying, this is how we do it, and then I can put them on to the larger group, and then they either fly or they don't.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying he's bad. I don't know if he's good or not. He has to be good if they're continually getting talent and stars. So might just be a little jealousy. I'm not going to admit to it. Might be a little jealousy. I'm just not going to admit to it.
Well, I did interview Cash Flow a couple of months ago, and he certainly put you over for your work in OVW. In terms of the debut, you were signed to a developmental deal. How did that come together by way of your transition? And correct me if I'm wrong, 2004 to the main roster. And I'm really interested to know a couple of things. One being, was the Eugene deal pitched to you right away? Were there alternatives? And then I'll ask the rest.
All right. So first off, Eugene was my idea that I pitched to them. But let's rewind back to 1999. Rico came, Cena came, Batista came, all these guys came. So all of a sudden it became pro level athletes. And then a group of guys from Southern Indiana, Conway, Basham, Danny Basham, Damage, and myself were probably the best athletes. But the other guys are great guys, might not be as athletically gifted as all these WWE superstars. So there became not a separation, but a separation in talent between the guys that were learning, and these guys might already know it, but they're not going to make it to WWE, unfortunately. So all of a sudden, Cornette comes to, in December of '99, comes to myself and one of the other guys, Flash Flanagan, who's also in there with me and Conway and Doug and Danny, and said, they're going to give you a developmental contract. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. But now all my buddies that I'm friends with, and also now I'm under contracts. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want an issue to come where they thought, well, why wasn't I signed? Why were only these two signed? You know what I mean? And we kind of Flash and I kind of kept it quiet for a while until then they offered the other ones contracts, and we're like, okay, yeah, we're under contract too. And they're like, what the fuck? But we made it out. So this was '99, and then I helped work with all those guys: Cena, Batista, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin, Victoria. You know, that first big crew. And then OVW moved to Louisville. And then when we moved over there, then I was in this Cornette's writing everything all this time. And I'm in the top, babyface top heel, but I'm also a slash player coach. And I'll be in the ring with them, maybe in training to like physically feel them and show them how to do the holds. But then I might wrestle them at the live events. I might be in a TV angle with them. I might be watching their videos with them. So Doug Basham, Danny Basham, Rob Conway all got called up to the main roster. And I'm sitting there, and so now I'm like, the new talent coming in, looking at me, guys like Carlito, maybe Matt Capitelli, Johnny Nitro, guys like that. They're all looking at me like, well, this is one of the coaches. So I'm no longer one of the boys. I am, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which wasn't a bad thing. But I'm like, how am I gonna get up to TV? So this was 2003. So from '99 to 2003. I'm just wrestling Nick Dinsmore, Cornette's writing for me. We're doing well. And Rip Rogers, whose son happens to have autism, Rip goes, what about a character that maybe, he's not very social in the locker room, but once he gets in the ring, he can do everything effortlessly and flawlessly because he's watched wrestling his whole life. Now, Rip's son at the time was like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, and apparently he wasn't getting very social at school, but he was a whiz on the computer. He could count in Korean, and I mean, like he had his specializations that he was great in. So, thought about that character for a while. The agents came down. Arn Anderson comes down, and I pitched that idea to Arn Anderson. I remember Arn goes, he puts his glasses up with his one finger. He goes, WWE is more reality based now. We don't really do gimmicks anymore. So I said, okay, that's all right. So I filed it back in my head. A couple more months go by, and the writers came down. The writers only came down when I was there to Louisville a handful of times. So I pitched it to the writers. And I remember the one writer was like, oh, Vince would never do anything like that. Okay, whatever. So more time goes by. And I'd seen a lot of guys go under developmental contract. They come to Louisville and they start complaining because they don't like Louisville or don't like OVW, and they get called up to the main roster. So I tell young wrestlers all the time, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I told Doug, I said, I think I'm going to quit and try to go to Japan. I had no contacts in Japan. I didn't know anybody. This was, 2003. So the internet was out there, but I wasn't on it or newly on it, and I didn't know how to get home. The connection wasn't there. I was bluffing. So Doug Basham tells Dean Malenko, Dean tells Johnny Ace, and then next thing I know, in February of '04, I'm sitting in a meeting with Vince McMahon and Stephanie McMahon at a Raw. And Vince goes, I want to get back to character-based wrestling. And I just spit it out. What about a character that's not very social, but he's wrestling idiot savant? And Vince is kind of mulling it over there, and Stephanie's talking about, oh, we could do this and do this creative-wise. And Vince is like, the Rain Man of wrestling. Vince didn't actually say that, but I want to remember the story that way because that sums it up. I don't even know if you knew what the movie Rain Man was. I really doubt it, but in my head, he goes, the Rain Man of wrestling. What did happen was Stone Cold Steve Austin walks in the room. He was back. I think they did a Saturday Night's Main Event. They taped it before Raw for one of his movies, I believe. So Vince goes, Steve, you ever seen this kid wrestling? Austin gives you that look, right? Where it's like down, but the head's back. And he goes, no, I don't think I have. I said, well, Nightmare Danny Davis trained me because I knew Austin and Danny had become good friends when they wrestled in Dallas. So Austin goes, well, he's probably one of the best. And it was like that vote of confidence that Vince goes, great, we'll start on Monday. We didn't actually start the very next Monday, but I think it was like, this was February of 04. April, I think, of 04 is when I debuted.
What, that sounds a lot less complicated than I would imagine. I know times were different there, but were you any concerned about how it would be presented on television and whether or not there would be like career-ending negative backlash to it? Because I remember as a fan, people going, Nick Dinsmore and well, the smart fans were saying this guy's a hell of a wrestler, blah blah blah, and they've given him this quote unquote mentally challenged gimmick. Were you afraid? It doesn't sound like you were really afraid of that happening, the cancel deal.
Well, back then there was really no term cancel. You know what I mean? And in my head, this was going to be, at the time, it was after Austin and after NWO, but everybody wanted to be a cool, strong heel that got their moves in. And I wasn't going to be the biggest guy to do that. I wasn't going to be a body guy. I had to do something different. I wanted to be a sympathetic comedy babyface, that sold and made comebacks because that's what I was good at. At the time, the brands were split. So Hurricane and Rosie were the only kids character on one brand. The other brand did not have a kid's character. So there's a whole target audience that, the comedy kids family character that wasn't being represented. And in my head, this was going to be one of the legendary wrestlers is Mighty Igor. Or if people really have seen like Ivan Putski, these were guys that almost much like George the Animal Steel that had a mind of a child. We're not putting any label on it because they never said, all they said was Eugene was special. Bischoff said my nephew's special. And we let the people draw their own conclusion. And these were guys that, that they act like they have a mind of a child. And that's all that we really put out there. So that's the way I tried to, I don't know if the word is emote the character or portray the character or do the character, was how did I feel about anything when I was a kid? When I'm watching wrestling, was I really excited, with something? Did I get scared? When the divas come out, do I get bashful? You know what I mean? What's that naive feeling that we all get when we're kids before we grow up and we realize kind of more of what's going on in the world? What's that naive, simple feeling that we get that people can latch onto? Because that's all it was going to be was, a character of an underdog character trying to make, his dreams come true. And just by hook or by crook, he made it. So one thing you're talking about, the cancel. So back then, some of the media outlets, some, very few, started saying, what's WWE doing now? What's WWE doing with this character? Never on me, never what's Eugene doing. It says, what's WWE doing with this character? But then once Eugene started to win and people started to get behind it and he's in the ring with The Rock and the snowball starts, that was all gone. That was out the window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's how I recall it as well. Here's an interesting question from a fan. Considering Radley, Boo Radley was a Smoky Mountain character, was he an influence on Eugene? Never thought of that before, but that's a great question.
No, but the funny thing is the first time I met Balls is when the ECW, I think the sci-fi invasion, the second invasion, not the earlier ones. I had my hair pulled back. I'm in the locker room. He keeps looking at me going, God, you look familiar. And I didn't watch a whole lot of ECW, but I knew who Balls Mahoney was. I knew who he was, And he goes, who are you looking at? And finally, when I get the gimmick on, he goes, oh my God, I didn't know it was you. And he goes into telling me about his Boo Radley character, more of it in Puerto Rico, because I think that's where he first started the character, was in Puerto Rico. And the TV was so hot in Puerto Rico that he had to be Boo Radley all the time. And he was saying when he went to the grocery store, he didn't go to the gym, but if he went to the beach or wherever he went, right? He had to be Boo Radley 100% of the time. But I grew up in the USWA area. I didn't grow up in the Smoky Mountain area. I didn't know about Smoky Mountain until they invaded USWA, but I don't think Balls was, I don't remember seeing him on USWA TV if he had. I didn't meet him until the sci-fi invasion, whatever that thing was.
Yeah, the zombie, etc. Wanted, a lot of fans and commentators look back on your immediate booking in a storyline with William Regal and some of those fantastic vignettes. I think about that training one that you did with him. Man, that's gold. That still stands out to this day. And then you're in programs with the incredibly heat-seeking Getting Coach, and then Triple H. What was going through your? Now I know you're a seasoned guy by this point in time, very familiar with your craft. But what was that like to hit the Fed running with such a high profile position? Was there ever any kind of that wrestling politics, that silent or overt heat from that?
No, because I think at that time the writers in the office knew, they might not have known me personally, but they knew Nick Dinsmore's got to be on TV somewhere. I'd heard Fit tell him before, we got to find a spot for Nick. He's been in OVW for 6 years now. This guy, we need to find a spot for him. And when I presented the character, I think that Vince and Stephanie and probably Triple H thought, okay, well, this is his shot. This is what he wants to do. Let's give him a chance at this character. If it doesn't work out, we'll just release him, because that's what they do. Creative's got nothing for you. And before I was ever on TV, I had a non-televised match, a live event match against Lance Cade. And I remember it was the Final Four, the NCAA Final Four was going on. So we were in St. Louis in the afternoon. We weren't even a night show. Maybe 6,000 or 8,000 people were there. Eugene goes out in a live event. Now, if you're not on TV and you go out on a WWF live event, unless they've heard of you, which most of the time they haven't, you're going to get booed. And at the end of that match, Lance was so good that I got beat and they were chanting Eugene's name. Never seen him before. I came back through the curtain. Arn Anderson, Triple H, and Stephanie was with them. They were all standing ovation. And Triple H says, "You embraced the character. You became the character." It wasn't somebody out there like upset because I got to be Eugene. I'm just being mad about it. I heard Dr. Tom talk about that when he was a Body Donna. If you watch him, he wasn't into it. He didn't believe it here. And I went out there just having a good time, just being goofy and just having fun. I'd learned how to do all the moves. I could do an hour Broadway and not use the same hold twice, no sweat professional. And I was just out there goofing off, really goofing off. And people bought into it. And it just hooked them. And it was a magical time, because when I tell guys this now, you can have a great character, but if the creative team does not know how to write for this character, you're not going to make it anywhere. And Brian Gerwick, who wrote all the rock, I guess the majority of the rock stuff, he could write for Eugene. And he liked Eugene, and all of a sudden it was off and running. Regal had been off with an injury, and he just so happened to be coming back, and they put him right in there, and it made the perfect odd couple. Bischoff, making Eugene Bischoff's nephew, gave him instant somewhat credibility, while still being a knock on WCW by making Bischoff, Eugene, Bischoff's nephew. And I remember it was either in the first meeting or maybe one of the first, maybe when Eugene debuted, Vince was talking about, maybe we find out that Bischoff's sister is this, and I remember Vince was like, this good-looking older woman. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, looking back now, it's like, okay, I get it. But at the time, I was like, yeah, it could be like, this could be the sister, and there could be some friction there with the family, I don't know. It never panned out, but it was an intriguing character, and it was a magical time because a lot of stars came together, and it was just, I was fortunate that I had 8 years of experience to be able to go out there and succeed when I was given the chance. I saw a lot of guys have less experience and go out there and they might have fumbled a little bit, and all of a sudden they're either back down OVW or they're released or they're in the mid cards just because they didn't have the experience. And I was just fortunate enough to go out there and home run after home run after home run.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of something that I wanted to ask you in a more circuitous way, but you mentioned about embracing that character, and you indicated that you had a good relationship with Terry Taylor, and there's a guy, fantastic technician, white meat baby face, his presentation in Mid-South, UWF, NWA, and then he goes to WWF and he's given that Rooster deal. And he has said many times that he didn't see the vision, so to speak, didn't embrace it. What did he give you any advice during this time about that running with the character?
No, I think by the time I made it as Eugene, he was now in TNA. I believe, or he was in the office and I didn't directly work with him. I don't. He might have been already out, but I never really talked too much about the Rooster character, but just his knowledge. I've been around him enough to absorb like some great stories, and his personality and his being is so strong that the first thing I think of is not the Red Rooster. You know what I mean? Because he's
Mm,
just an awesome, special person.
hmm.
But
Yeah.
I've heard the same. I've heard the same promos where he's like, he probably could have. He probably could have leaned into it a little more.
Yeah, I guess it's easier said than done, but yeah, for sure, not really the best presentation for Terry Taylor in hindsight.
Well, hold on. I tell guys all the time, if you believe it in the ring and you're having a good time, the fans are going to believe it. But if you're out there, I say, guys, okay, let's say you got to be a fireman. I get you a hat, I get you the hose, the hook, I get you the Dalmatian, the truck. If I don't know what a fireman does, I'm out here going, I'm playing a fireman, and the people just instinctively eat up on it. But if I know what a fireman does, or I can portray what I think a fireman does, and be confident and be having a good time, they're gonna fucking get with it.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. When you were in that initial period on the main roster, it's got a reputation for being at least the mythology or the internet talks about it. So take that with a grain of salt. But it was it was somewhat of a hostile environment in terms of what they refer to as bullying and whatever. And one of the fans wanted to know, who would you consider the biggest dick backstage during your WWE run?
Absolutely nobody, because you got to think, by the time I made it to TV, over half the locker room had already been in OVW, and I'd been their coach. So by the time I made it there, guys like Randy Orton are like, "You're finally here! Oh my God!" And then I got over so quickly. I get over with Triple H and Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels because also now I'm a top guy. So I knew everybody, and there might have been guys on SmackDown, but I don't think so, because I think everybody knew who I was. Because even some of the other main event, or the on TV contract, not contract, what am I trying to say? Main roster. Some of the other main roster that had been injured had come to Louisville to do some therapy and some getting in the ring. And I was like, man, I wasn't the head coach, but I was the number one guy, telling guys what to do. Let's go, let's get the people blowing the whistle. I mean, like Bob Holly might have been a guy that might have appeared as somewhat rough on some people, but he saw me as a coach. So all of a sudden, I felt a little bit, you know what I mean? He treated me differently.
Were you there when? And that's funny you bring up Hardcore Holly. It's one of the questions I want to ask you. Were you there in 2000? I guess it was 4 in Rochester when he had that. I guess you would call it altercation in the ring and backstage with a man that has been in Great North Wrestling recently, Rene Dupree.
No, that happened on SmackDown, and I was on Raw, and I didn't see it. Renee's told me about it, but that's his story to tell. I mean, I don't know what exactly went down, but the story's probably somewhat close to what happened, if not the truth. Pardon me, if not the truth. But after that, in 2017, when I had a wrestling company in South Dakota, I brought Bob in, and he was fantastic. Nicest guy, early, stayed late, took pictures with all the fans, had a great match, no stress. I mean, just the perfect top guy that you want to bring in to draw people, and he drew people for me.
Yeah.
So I like Bob.
For sure. And last, amongst these altercation questions that have been sent in, were you there for the whatever you want to call the Flair Bischoff thing, or the Angle Guerrero altercation?
No, I don't know the Flair Bischoff one. I don't know that one, but I think the Angle and Eddie one happened before I was on TV. I think it was like, because they're at WrestleMania 20, which, I mean, I might have been around, but I might have been injured. I don't know. I don't remember either one of those, and I don't really remember anybody talking about them either, because as alpha males in the back, sometimes shoving gets a little bit more and heated, but it always happens that guys come back together because we're a family and a team in the locker room. And you might hear one little dust up, two little dust ups over 50 years. You know what I mean? And there's a handful, but you don't hear, like, this shit doesn't happen all the time. And the times that it happens and it gets out, they're like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? It's like crazy back there." When no, we're like, it's much easier. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was about 2004. I had a flip phone, and Cena and Orton started wrestling and like shoot wrestling. Like Randy was an amateur wrestler. I don't think Cena was, but they're wrestling in the locker room. So immediately I start filming it. And I've got it somewhere, but it's like on that old flip phone. So when you look at it now, it's all pixelated and all you hear is the voice. But I'm not going to say both of them were in their underwear, but you can imagine two guys like alpha males just having fun, just like trying to best one another in a setting where it's probably not very appropriate, but it was in the locker room. So what the heck?
Absolutely. What and you talk about and everybody remembers that aspect of working with Eric Bischoff and specifically that Taboo Tuesday deal where he got his head shaved, etc. There's that aspect of it under I guess it would be really inside sort of baseball then, maybe not, about his association with Eugene being a rib. What was your experience like working with Eric in terms of embracing that I guess you could say it was unique position that he was in at the time?
So I had met Eric when I did a few WCW shots in '98-ish. Shook his hand. How you doing? Nice to meet you. That was it. He didn't. I'm assuming he didn't remember me, of course, but that's okay. But when he was in WWE, he was 100% talent, 100% there, 100% willing to get over whatever it was. If he could offer something to make it better, that's great. If the writers say we want it this way, great, let's do it. I never saw him upset or pouty or boo-boo face or we shouldn't be doing this. The only time that he really, I mean, he came to Regal and I, and he was like, he wanted to get some good heat on Eugene going into the match where the fans get to choose if it's, I don't remember what it was, wear a dress, do something, or get your head shaved, and everybody chose head shaved. And they didn't really write him as much heat as I think he wanted to get that we could have gotten, which would have made the match a little hotter. But then again, this is not one of the heat-driven matches. This is a comedy match where he offered to shave his head. So he comes and he's talking to Regal and I about it, and Regal goes, well, you're going to have to do something that we used to have to do to you. Go convince them that your idea is their idea. So Bischoff gets up, runs off. There was no anger in this conversation. This was all buddies talking. You know what I mean? How can we make this better for all of us? You want this? Okay, let's do this. Bischoff takes off to the office. Then the writers come back. Yeah, we're going to go ahead. Because one thing that Eugene and Regal never got to do was the turn angle. Either Regal turns on him, which I assume would have been the best, or Eugene turns on Regal, whatever it is. But we never got to do it. So we're at the pay-per-view for the hair versus hair, the match where he got his head shaved. Bischoff got his head shaved. And the writer assistant comes back and goes, oh, yeah, Regal, they're going to have you turn on Eugene tonight. Eugene, we're going to shave your head. And Regal's in his three-piece suit. He just calmly gets up and walks off. Come back a little later. No, you're going to pin Bischoff and we're going to shave his head. So I don't know what was said outside of it. And I never saw any animosity or anger, or I never saw anybody talk bad about anybody. It was just, hey, this is better for business. This is better for us. I mean, Bischoff wanted to shave his head. He's the one who brought this up. You know, it sucks that we didn't give him enough heat, but we're here. You know, it wasn't. Bischoff was awesome. Awesome.
Speaking of Regal, something popped into my head there. Was there ever any talk? You guys were a pretty engaging package in terms of a tag team. Was there ever any thought to putting those belts on you guys?
We won the tag titles. Yeah, we won the tag titles in Indianapolis after Eugene had his rise and Regal was kind of there. Again, Regal was coming back from an injury. So when he finally got cleared to 100% wrestle, after I wrestled Triple H at SummerSlam, then we started our tag team, and we ended up beating La Resistance sometime after that. And we had the tag team titles. And then in Puerto Rico at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view, I blew out my patella tendon. I tore my left knee, the patella tendon, and I had to have surgery. And I was scheduled to be out for 9 months, and I was only out for 6 months. But that's when they sent Regal to SmackDown, and the team was broken up.
One of the many questions that the fans sent in, and we've got some here, of course, is your thoughts on working with Vince McMahon, being under his direction. And I'm assuming you saw that Netflix series, and a lot of questions have come in wanting your thoughts on Vince. And you've touched on a little bit already, but your any incidents with him or interactions with him, not necessarily incidents, and your thoughts on that series.
So I watched the series. It was well produced. It was a WWE product. I mean, even though it was a Netflix product, it was a WWE promotional product. And I didn't like the fact that it talked about so much stuff that they did on TV, because we can go back and watch all that. If I want a documentary on Vince, I want to hear what was going on when the cameras weren't rolling or when he wasn't on camera. I don't want to see him. I don't want to rehash angles that we've seen in highlights for the past 15 years. You know what I mean? And I would say 3/4 to maybe 90% of it was just that. And it talked very little on his personal upbringing and the family, and just every little episode had a little bit, but I feel like that should have been much more. But it was a great presentation. I had a great professional relationship with him. I mean, when you're making money for Vince, all of a sudden, he wants to use you, and you're in and around. And the guys that are assholes or difficult to deal with don't last very long. Guys that, are very, I don't know. And you don't see them because, I don't know, the atmosphere in WWE seems different than what you hear in like maybe Hollywood, where some actors are like pushing their feet back going, I'm not doing this role, or I'm going to do it this way, or I have to have 19 jelly beans in my locker room. We were all family, man, and especially back then, and that's all I really have to draw from. But when I tore my ACL or tore my patella tendon, I went to Birmingham to have knee surgery, and I was there for about a month. I'm doing a therapy in Birmingham, and that's when Vince slid in the Royal Rumble and blew out both of his legs. Remember that?
Yeah, but were they quads?
I think he blew out both his quad tendons, and then
Yeah,
he goes to
walking in the ring.
Birmingham. He has surgery. I know where the hospital is. I know when he has surgery, so I just go in the hospital and ask for his room, and I go walk right up to his room, and he's there with the cast on both legs, and he hadn't shaven in a couple of days, and I could tell immediately like he was like, nobody sees him without shaving until the mustache came out recently. Nobody saw him without shaving, and I simply told him I knew he had somebody there. Somebody's there for him. I'm like, I'm in town. If you need anything, I'm here. I whatever you need, and I left. And my biggest regret, my number one regret, is I should have put a chair next to his bed and sat down and talked his ear off until he forced me to leave, and just picked his brain and talked to him as long as he would talk to me. I should have done that just to absorb the information, just to get a better relationship with him. But I was so scared and so nervous because that's Vince McMahon. Vince and The Undertaker were the only two guys that I really got nervous around in the back, and I don't know why. Vince just, I guess, for being Vince, but Taker still looked like some kind of, when he had all the gimmick on, he looked tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any? I know you also touched on working with Stephanie, and depending on who you speak with, her I want to say role in creative, but she can be daunting or a polarizing figure. I guess the best way to put it. A fan here is asking your thoughts on that experience too.
So the only time that I remember is actually in that eventual the very first pitch that I had to Vince, when I very first pitched the character. Stephanie was there. I think maybe when I was on TV, she might have been on the SmackDown writing crew, maybe, but I had been around her. But she was also very close to my age, and not that we really discussed anything in common. But after I went and saw Vince at the hospital, she called me on the telephone a couple of days later, thanking me, and I didn't know her well, but she was always pleasant and very nice. Oh my gosh, it's Eugene, and shaking my hand. And like I said, I don't know if she knows that she was just a little bit younger than me, I think, but it was just, she might be a lot younger, but I feel like we're in the same kind of high school era. You know what I mean? So you got some commonalities. I assume that the elites go to the same kind of high schools that the rest of us go to, or at least have the same kind of upbringing. But I don't know. I really liked her.
You were, a part of WrestleMania 21 where you were, attacked by Hassan and Daivari and
those
Hogan.
No good sons of guns. Those no good sons. I still want my retribution from that.
Those foreign menaces, so to speak,
Yeah.
and Hogan came out and made the save. And Eugene was a big fan, a big Hulkamaniac, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was probably the first opportunity that you had to work with Hogan. So that's part A of the question. What that experience was like must have been a thrill given the setting. And second of all, he was on Netflix recently for the debut, and I thought the crowd were pretty harsh on him. What are your thoughts on the role of Hogan in and just this past weekend wasn't on Saturday night's main event due to family commitments. What do you think the role of Hogan is in the company moving forward? Is there a role, and is he that Babe Ruth figure that Vince McMahon always talked about having?
I don't know what his role is going forward, but he's definitely on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling greats, without a doubt. And he's probably the George Washington. I mean, he's the man, and he's still going today. I'm going to say he's drawn more people and more money than any wrestler ever. Some guys might have drawn more at specific events or years or something, but the duration of, since 1980, 1970s of Hulkamania, I'm here, in the beachfront condo, and Hogan's Hangout is just a couple miles down the road. The Hogan Beach Shop is just a couple miles down the road. I mean, I absolutely love Hulk Hogan. When I did the WrestleMania bit, WrestleMania 21 in LA, I was only 3 months after having knee surgery. I wasn't cleared to get in the ring, and I if you watch it back, I mean, I'm not moving around a whole lot. They don't see me moving around, but it was difficult moving around. I had a big knee brace on, but they give me the camel clutch, and the Hulkster comes out and saves the day. I absolutely love the Hulkster. Now, what some people don't know about the Netflix deal, and this might be a bombshell exclusive for you right here. All those boos were piped in. They're working towards Hollywood Hogan against Rock 2 at WrestleMania. All those boos, it's all work. All those boos are piped in, brother. Hulkster's still on top, man.
You've been reading the dirt sheets.
I'm trying to get a narrative out there, man.
NWO Hogan returns, right?
Right, absolutely. With that, that's what they want. If they hit that Jimi Hendrix, the place is going to go bananas.
Yeah, definitely money on the table there. You talked about briefly that you weren't an ECW aficionado, but a lot of fans remember your promo in 2006, and I remember watching it thinking, holy cow, Eugene has got some brass, what's to be going out to do that. What did you prepare for that in a different way, knowing that crowd would be behaving in the way that they thought an old school ECW crowd would, put it that way?
So it's not that I wasn't an ECW aficionado. USWA was still strong in Louisville, and ECW had like a 2 a.m. time slot, and I just didn't see it. USW, I think in other markets, the channel that USWA had in the Louisville area and other markets, I think ECW filled that, if that makes sense. And we still watch USWA. Plus, I was just started wrestling when ECW was kind of, the wave was coming and the internet was coming, and I was on the road, with USWA. We were traveling all around the place. I really didn't get a chance to watch much anything. But that was the one you're talking about was the second one-night stand. I don't know how you can have 2 one-night stands, but apparently you can have 2 one-night stands. And on the second one is when Eugene went out and read his poem in the Hammerstein Ballroom. And as you say it now, I'm like, yeah, how did I prepare for that? And I think I just went out there and did it. I might remember, I think I had it on a piece of paper. I didn't memorize it because it was pretty good. It was written by, I assume Brian Gerwick wrote it because he gave it to me. And we went over it a couple of times. And I just let the people do what they're going to do. And then God blessed Sandman comes out. I didn't mind him having 1 Singapore cane, 1 kendo stick. But when the front row gave him a second one, and now he's just like Tommy Lee drumming my ass up the thing, that hurt. That hurt.
Well, that's certainly definitely a memorable moment. Was there ever any consideration of, were you injured at that point in time? Or were you ever going to wrestle? Because the heat that you got there was incredible in that particular pay-per-view.
Well, Eugene only really got that heat in that building, in that night, saying that poem. Once we got back to regular crowd, it was totally different. I mean, Cena was also booed at the building that night, and everywhere else around the world, it was sellout for Cena. It was a manipulated crowd that the writers knew how to press their buttons, and that's what they wanted to do, and I think they did a good job of it.
Yeah, 100%. Here's a fan asking about a question that I was going to ask about your deal with Hacksaw. Were you given how beloved you were by the non-ECW Hammerstein audience as a baby face and an inspiration? People are still talking about here in our broadcast what an inspiration you were. Were you trepidatious about turning heel in that setting, or walk us through that and making it work too? Because that had to be a challenge.
Well, I didn't make it work. That's the thing. I didn't make it work because all of a sudden it was 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of Eugene acting funny, and then it just went away. So I don't know. Trepidation's a good word. I don't know if it was my trepidation as not wanting to be a heel or not being able to pull it off. Maybe I realized that if all of a sudden Eugene's a heel, I'm going to get less merchandise, which means I'm going to make less money. Or maybe it was like the fans see. I always said like I feel like the fans saw Eugene like Ronald McDonald. And Ronald McDonald can't be a bad guy. You know, there's just no, that doesn't work. So I don't know if it was like me not wanting to make it work or me not figuring out a way that I could have made it work the best. But I will say this. I love Hacksaw. He was a great partner. But if I would have turned on Shawn Michaels, I would have gotten a lot more heat than if I turned on Hacksaw. Hacksaw is great, but Hacksaw is no Shawn Michaels at that time. If I would have turned on Shawn and left him laying, Eugene would have got some heat. You know, if I would have done something a little more, because Eugene, I feel like Eugene pushed the boundary. You know, if I would have gotten, I'm not saying I don't know what, but something that was a little bit more edgy than turning on Hacksaw, which is great, but we were seen as kind of like a comedy act, you know, and it was like, I don't know.
Did you have a preference between working heel or babyface?
I feel like in pro wrestling, a good heel in the ring, somewhere inside their personality, they're a heel. You know what I mean? They're something. They might be a great guy to you, but something about them, there's a heel. Me, I've always been a babyface because that's me. I mean, someone asked Coach one time online, "Who's the nice guy in the locker room?" He said me, because I'm always wanting everybody to have a good time, get along, let's have some fun, whatever, and it's just go along to get along. I've learned how to be a heel in the ring, perform as a heel, and make all the facials and do the right moves and do the right things. But deep down inside, I want to hear the people cheer.
Mm-hmm. And there's always a need for strong baby faces. Here's a fan question that I'm almost going to guarantee maybe you haven't been asked before. But when you're in the WWE, do you think it would have been a great idea for you to be the poster boy for Special Olympics worldwide and work with the athletes to be kind of an ambassador?
So maybe possibly, yeah, without a doubt that could have been there. But this was back before Vince wanted to say the charitable works that WWE did. Used to be Vince did all kinds of charitable works, but he would not promote it. He would not talk about it. This is something we do because it's right, and that's it. And it was Cena that said, "Listen, no, wait a minute. This is we got to tell these people what we're doing because we're doing great things. We're making people happy. We got to show everybody exactly what we're doing." And I think when that happened, it was right around the time that they went PG and tripled their advertising dollar, and everything exploded. But without a doubt, Eugene could have been in there somewhere.
Yeah,
Eugene probably still could be in there somewhere. Who knows?
That's an interesting proposition. In 2007, you left the company, if I have the year correct, and you had such an iconic character. It would just make sense for you to carry that on in your non WWE tenure. Two-part question again. The first being, how do you feel you've modified the name of your character, your presentation a bit because of the whole intellectual property deal? How do you feel about the WWE, at least historically, not allowing talents to take their characters out, on an independent level, not even say a competitor, so to speak, which there isn't any. And was there ever any thought to you returning to WWE in a non-Eugene character, like a shooter Nick Dinsmore?
No, the last part, no. I was never going to come back as just a wrestler. I didn't mind them. If we sign over our intellectual property to WWE and they own the rights to it, I mean, that's the rules, that's the laws, If you come up with intellectual property and you patent it yourself, then it's yours. But if it's them to put it on TV first, I mean, it's their TV. You're nothing without their TV. I don't know if now they've kind of relaxed on that, but I will say this. Eugene changed to the letter U-Gene, and I sold the EUGENE intellectual property that I came up with. I didn't sell it. I signed it over to WWE. But the U-GENE intellectual property that I have is now completely different character. I don't do the same moves. I do the same moves. I don't have the same act. I've got the exact same act. You know what I mean? It's just modify the words a little bit. But I've never once received any kind of cease and desist for them to say, don't be Eugene, don't do this. I mean, I've still been in somewhat good connections with them. I don't think I've burned a bridge. We wrestled in France one time. Scotty Tuhati was there. A couple other Balls was there. Sabu was there. Test was there before he passed away. And we were going to do live TV in Paris. And WWE sent the promoter a cease and desist on the WWE music. Couldn't be used. Not the characters, not the names, not anybody, none of us personally, but the promoter. We were on tour for like 17 days, and the only one they cared about was the TV in France that you couldn't use their music.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Seems reasonable. Here's a... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead. There was two parts, but I answered the second part first, right?
Yeah, you hit the other one about coming back just as, a different character altogether. Say you had a wake up from a amnesia deal or something. That was never on the table to come back and just be a badass technician.
That's what Al Snow did in OVW, and I had a short stint in 2007 right after I got released. He had me wake up from a bad dream. Oh, that was a bad dream. And I went back as Mr. Wrestling, but there was I was re-signed in 2009 for a short period, but then I got beat by the Calgary Kid who turned out to be Miz in Calgary. So I was there for less than a cup of coffee on my second time.
Mm-hmm. One really deep cut fan question that I got was referring to your involvement in 2009 in Hulk Hogan's, I guess, infamous Australian tour that was plagued allegedly by travel and financial issues. Do you have any memories of being involved in that deal?
So the reports are, I think, coming from the guy that put it on, because all the talent, it was awesome. All the talent got paid exactly what we were supposed to get paid. We were flown. I mean, I wasn't first class, but I was flown to Australia, and we did 4 cities, but then we would stay a couple days in each city. So it's like there was no hectic travel. It was very relaxed. They went to the buildings that WWE goes to that holds 25, 30,000 people. They drew 10 to 15, which was a great crowd, but they got this huge building they got to pay for, and they didn't fill it up. It was more on the promotion, didn't book the buildings that would have been best for the crowd that we actually drew, and they were expecting, packed out everywhere. But it was awesome. I mean, one day, Hulk's down in the pool, and we're all out there in the pool, and I got my picture with Hulk and all the whole crew. But Hulk wrestled Ric Flair. Flair was kayfabing. He was on the other side of the pool by himself. So I walked over and I sat with him for a little while, but he was just there sunning himself. But it was just so cool. It was, and the food was great. Like for the first couple towns, they were like, oh, just go to the buffet. And they put us up in 5-star hotels, 6-star hotels. And one buffet was like $85 a plate. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I think when the promoter realized how much money he was losing, then he started giving us $25 a day. So all of us would just go to the dollar menu at McDonald's, but that didn't matter. It was awesome.
That's an interesting take on that. That seems to be a lot of wildly conflicting information out there.
I mean, I think business wise, it was a failure for the guys that invested in the thing. But I think, from what I've heard, Brian Knobs told me this of the Nasty Boys, that Hulk went in and put his foot down and said, no, you got to pay the wrestlers. And you can lose all your money, I don't care, but you got to pay the wrestlers. And all the wrestlers, I got paid at least. I mean, I assume everybody. I've never heard anybody on the tour say they didn't get paid, but I've heard the promoter or the investors or somebody say it didn't pan out like they hoped it would. But isn't that business, right? And you take the chance and you roll the dice. I mean, you could have had a smaller building that was less expensive. You could have put us up in a less expensive hotel. You could have partnered everybody up in a hotel room. You could have, Hogan and all those guys got first class seats over. I mean, you could have scaled back the expense, and then I don't know. I'm not promoting worldwide tours, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, that should be on the promoter, as you say, as long as the talent gets paid. Ivan is asking, and we've heard lots of lots of stories from Puerto Rico and their wild fans, even into the 90s and early 2000s. What was your experience like in Puerto Rico?
What was Invader's name?
Jose.
Jose Gonzalez.
Yes. Yeah.
Jose Gonzalez. Right. So, first time I went to Puerto Rico, I think I went down when I injured my knee and I tore my patella tendon, and then I was doing therapy, and I was getting pretty close to getting a doctor releasing me to wrestle. Maybe I just been released and to wrestle, and Johnny A says, "Well, we're gonna send you down to Puerto Rico to wrestle a couple shows," and I assume it's because Bushwhacker Luke was booking for Carlos's group, right? No, IWA. It was for Savio's group. He was booking for Savio's group, and Johnny Ace was the flag holder for the sheep herders. So I assume that was the connection. But either way, I did 2 shows, and I'm in the Puerto Rican locker room. You know, it's hot and steamy, but the guys are cool. And Flash Flanagan was there. I knew him. I get to meet Bushwhacker Luke, and all of a sudden, one of the boys come. We want you to meet the booker. So I'm following him, and I don't realize that I follow him into the shower, and they're sitting on a chair. Guy goes, "Hi, I'm Jose Gonzalez. I'm the booker," and I'm just standing in the shower going, like I could just. I mean, it was like, I don't know. And he just gave me the finish of the match, thanked me, whatever, nice enough guy. And I left. But it was like that moment I like realized, oh my God, this is like surreal. But the matches were great. The towns were great. I've been back since. I've been back to work for Carlos's group. I went down for one of their big anniversary shows. I mean, I enjoy Puerto Rico.
Wow, that's a surreal moment. Adam Bomb, Mr. Clark is saying he enjoyed working with you on Nitro. I guess he was Wraith, and
he took care of me. So he took care of me, and then the next town when we had Live Thunder, he let me ride with him. And so Jim, and then it wasn't Anvil. It was Anvil there. I can't remember, but it was Davey Boy Smith. And I was a huge British Bulldogs fan growing up, right? So Davey Boy and Wraith is driving, Adam's driving. I'm sitting in the back. And I'm now shut, ears open. We get to the hotel, and there was a Denny's or something connected to the hotel. So I go to eat, and then Davey Boy's sitting at the bar at the they get the breakfast bar, and he's eating there, and the fans are coming up to him asking for autographs, and he finishes his meal, and I'm sitting by myself, and he starts to walk off, and he turns around, and Davey goes, we'll get you in 45 minutes, and we'll all go to the gym. I was like, okay, and he walks off, and then all the fans turn to me, and I was like, yep, I'm a wrestler. You know what I mean? So he took care of me when he wrestled me on Nitro, and then like afterwards, he's a really nice guy.
Yeah, one hell of a talent. We're getting towards the end of our time, but I just want to ask you a couple more questions. One being, in terms of the modern wrestling product, are you a fan? And WWE's doing their own thing. They're a whole different entity. But are you a fan of the AEW style, for lack of a better term? And what advice would you have for Mr. Khan to turn that business around, considering how important it is to have other places for the boys to work?
So I don't really keep up with any of the current product. I can't get away from it on social media, so I do see clips and highlights and pictures and stuff, and I don't know what I could tell Tony Khan other than if you were to hire Nick Dinsmore, I'm sure all those problems would just sort itself out. That would be the number one thing. I mean, I'm just saying, but is the company making money? Because realistically, it's a television show portraying a live event. It's no longer the model of a live event that's being filmed and put on TV to advertise the live event. It's now a TV show. You know what I mean? And if the ratings, if the TV is making the money, I mean, isn't that what you're trying to do? That's the business model, is to make money. I mean, how can you say something if it's not making money? Then you can say maybe it's not as successful as it can be. But if it's making money and everybody's happy, maybe you're not making what WWE's making, but they're like the Coca-Cola and you're the Pepsi, man. You know what I mean? I mean, not that AEW can't surpass WWE at some point, but if you're making money, I can't see how people can say it's a failure. If they're not making money, or if they're just getting by, it might be struggling, and I don't know if that's the case. Because everybody complains about what the ratings are, but I don't hear what the advertising dollars are. I never see a post that says, I might not look for them, but I never see a post that says, oh, well, they only made $350,000 in one quarter of this TV, and if you're making that kind of money on primetime cable TV, I don't know what their production costs are. I don't know what their talent costs are. I don't know what their operating costs are, but I don't know if they're succeeding or failing, but they're still on TV, and that gives the guys somewhere to work. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean the common discourse has it that AEW is losing, a lot of money. But do you also think that wrestling fans should probably go back to, instead of scrutinizing ad rates, key demos, quarter hours, earnings, to a more simple enjoyment of the product, and that would be better for the business across the board? Or is that like putting the toothpaste back into the tube, given we're in the internet age?
I don't know if it's putting the toothpaste back in the tube, but you just described the entirety of America. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anybody knows what the answer is, but it's like people have a voice and they're allowed to have a voice, and they might say things that people disagree with, and people disagree. And everybody, I would hope that everybody wants to be cordial, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And we just have to learn how to live in the current environment that we're in. And I don't know if we're going to do that. I just turn off my social media and take a walk in the sun here in Florida. That's about all I can do.
Yeah, and touch grass, as Mr. Punk said once. Well, this has been a very engaging interview. Certainly didn't disappoint. You have a wealth of experience and insights into your career in the business in general. But this is my final question, maybe a little bit difficult to delineate down or boil down, but what would you say you were most proud of from and not that you're retired, but from your wrestling career thus far, and how would you like the fans to remember you?
What am I most proud of? Oh my gosh, it's hard to say. I mean, I was in there with The Rock. I was in the ring with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. I even pinned Vince McMahon. I got the action figure, the teddy bear. I got the T-shirt. You know what I mean? I was in main event matches that are known around the world. I just am thankful that I got to be on the ride. You know what I mean? And it's just me looking back and having the fulfilling the dream of the 8-year-old boy that was watching Saturday Night's Main Event and going, you know what? I want to do this. And it's just, I had the ability and the opportunity and the chances, and God willing, I made it, made it through. But going forward, I mean, people can check me out on my YouTube channel, which is Eugene Behind the Scenes. And I talk about some of the things that were going on as I was in my WWE run, but kind of behind the scenes and what was going on in the locker room, in the car. If there was a discussion, I might have personal pictures that I upload and show. But Eugene Behind the Scenes YouTube channel. And then I got my Twitter, which is at the letter U, Gene, Dinsmore, Dinsmore. And I'm just going to keep on LIVIN, as Matthew McConaughey would say, right?
That's a very, I mean, one thing that comes from your presentation, I've seen your broadcast as well, is the fact that, you've been in a very difficult business for a number of decades, but you seem very positive and thankful and appreciative. Is that the key to having the longevity in the business that you have?
I think that's the key to life, man. You can't live and say, I wish I'd done this, or you can't live in regret, essay. You know what I mean? That's what they say. You got to go forward. You got to play the hand you're dealt, and the only thing that you can really control is your attitude. So I mean, I'm thankful to be given what I'm given. I'm thankful to be here today, and I'm excited about the future.
Well, I want to thank you again, Nick, for your time. It's been a really interesting one. Encourage the fans to check out all your social media and your products moving forward. And I have a feeling we'll do this again in the future.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Fans, that's it for this edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast with the one and only Nick Eugene Dinsmore. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Hannibal TV on YouTube. Hit that notification button, and you won't miss any of this great content. I'm Jack Kilby, thanking you for tuning in.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news.